express my grave concerns about the administration's response to the situation in Honduras. There are few absolutes in the arena of diplomacy and international affairs. As circumstances and regimes change, so do our interest and allegiances. But one principle that should stand as a bedrock constant is this: a friend of freedom is a friend of America. Our commitment to freedom is not confined to a culture or a continent. It is absolute and universal. It was this principle, hardwired into our DNA, that President Obama appeared to violate during his 8 days of silence while innocent democratic demonstrators were tortured and murdered in the streets of Tehran by Iran's tyrannical regime. Thankfully, the President eventually changed his rhetoric and offered at least some support to the people of Iran, risking their lives for their freedom. But he stopped short of any criticism or action that might be construed as meddling, in his words, in the domestic affairs of a sovereign nation. But in the last week, the President has reversed course, meddling up to his ears in the domestic affairs of another sovereign nation, Honduras. And depressingly, the President has once again sided with an illegitimate and anti-American autocrat over democracy, the rule of law, and an oppressed people who only want to be free. The facts on the ground in Honduras are neither disputed or confusing, but they have been largely ignored by an international media distracted by the death of a celebrity. Let me read these facts into the record. Honduras is a constitutional republic and a longtime ally of the United States. It is one of the poorest nations in the Western Hemisphere, especially since it was ravaged by the direct hit of Hurricane Mitch in 1998. In 2005, Hondurans elected as their president Manuel Zelaya, a left-of-center but seemingly moderate candidate for the Liberal Party. Given Latin America's troubling history of military coups and self-appointed presidents for life, the Honduran Constitution strictly limits presidents to one term. So seriously do Hondurans take their presidential term limits that in Latin America the phrase, and I'll butcher this Spanish, but I want to give it a try, continuar en el dudar, or pudar, It means to continue in power. It carries a dark connotation to the region for everyone living there. For a president to overthrow the Constitution and violate term limits is violating the constitutional form of government. So seriously that Article 238 of the Honduran Constitution says that any president who even proposes an extension of his tenure of office, and I quote, shall immediately cease performing the functions of his post. So it is a de facto resignation of office in Honduras for a president to attempt to do what their president did. Zelaya's 2005 campaign was supported by Hugo Chavez, the Marxist Venezuelan dictator bent on amassing power in the Western Hemisphere at the expense of what he calls the North American Empire. That is us. Zelaya quickly aligned his government with Chavez's and joined anti-American socialists like the Castro brothers in Cuba and Daniel Ortega in Nicaragua and Chavez's economic cartel. When Zelaya's term is coming to an end next year, Chavez convinced him to do as he himself had done in Venezuela, to force a constitutional amendment extending his presidential term. Now, this would be in direct violation of what their Constitution says. Earlier this year, Zelaya called for a referendum to initiate a constitutional convention. In the ensuing litigation, the Honduran courts ruled the referendum was unconstitutional and illegal, as the Honduran Constitution explicitly gives only its Congress the power to call such a vote. Zelaya forged ahead, calling his referendum a non-binding survey. This, too, the Supreme Court found unconstitutional. Zelaya then ordered the head of the Honduran military, General Vasquez, to conduct the election anyway. Vasquez expressed concerns about the vote's legality, so Zelaya fired him. The Supreme Court ordered Zelaya to reinstate Vasquez, and Zelaya refused. The Supreme Court ordered the military to seize the referendum ballots to prevent Zelaya from going ahead with the illegal vote. Zelaya then personally led an armed mob to steal back the ballots, which it should be noted were suspiciously printed in Venezuela. Zelaya ordered the government to set up 15,000 polling places to conduct the referendum for June the 28th. On Friday, June the 26th, the Attorney General of Honduras, Luis Rubi, filed a complaint before the Honduran Supreme Court, petitioning for an arrest warrant for President Zelaya. The court issued the warrant unanimously and, according to the Constitution, ordered the Honduran military to execute it. Early in the morning of Sunday, June the 28th, the day of the vote, the military arrested President Zelaya at his home. They put him on a plane to Costa Rica, as Honduras has no prison capable of withstanding a mob riot of the sort they feared Chavez and Ortega might whip up. So they did it for his safety. The same day, the Honduran Congress, controlled by Zelaya's Liberal Party, his own party, voted 125-3 to replace Zelaya with their speaker, Roberto Micheletti, as a member of the Liberal Party. This transfer of power was strictly in keeping with Honduras.